All right,
Cool.
Chase Auker. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
You got your glass?
I do.
Salud.
Yes, sir. Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
So, welcome to my podcast. You are the officially first podcast guest that made the I guess what do you even call it? You were the first one I published publicly because I've had
Yeah.
recorded sessions before, particularly with David for the first time.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was a special moment when I published that episode of ours, and it was public for people to see, and they can go watch it. And we've had quite a bit of people see that episode now, right? And they'll reference some stuff from it, which is really interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. I've had people. That's a thing. Yeah, I have people discuss some things for my podcasts, and I'm like, wow,
Oh, whoa.
it's like a weird, like you, for example, have done it to me
Mm-hmm.
with Octavio.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about Octavio in the podcast, and every
Yeah.
time I'm like, oh man, I forget that I put this thing out, like, and people hear what I
You're like, how
say.
did you know I talked about that? Like that that was a private conversation. What the fuck?
It feels like that when
That's
I
funny.
when I do in person,
Yeah.
particularly. It feels very private because it's
Right.
been mostly just my buddies that I'm really close with, and so it's really not much different than just bullshitting, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think if I remember right, one of the things I had told you when you were first spitballing this idea with me, you were like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this podcast," and like, but I don't know like how many people are gonna watch it. And I was like, dude, think about it like this, like so I'm looking at that video right now. It has 45 views. So like imagine a room of 45 people like sitting and listening to you. I mean, that's like a entire classroom of people. Like if you did a live event like at the college and 45 people showed up, or some of your other ones here have 103 views or 116 views, like your one with Reed has 116 views. That's crazy. Like imagine a room of 116 people. It's insane. Like you would feel a lot of pressure to perform, for that. So it's just it's like a bit of a perspective shift. I think we're used to seeing like videos with millions of views and things like that, but when you put it into perspective of like an arena, it feels quite different.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Um, before I started this, that notion was certainly different for me. Now, if
Hmm.
like literally like 20 people watch one of my videos, it's like a very exciting and kind of, yeah, you're right, like kind of scary. Kind of like, oof, like, geez, everything I
Yeah, like,
said,
oh crap.
I kept in there for the most part. Like, I really barely take anything out, like, unless it's some
Yeah.
like, some things I shouldn't say because it's like a work thing. And I'm like, I don't know if I should be talking about this, then I'll just edit it out just to be but really everything else I keep in there. And yeah, you're right. Like all those people that we watch probably or listen to rather, right? They're in hundred thousands, millions of views, but they're like the top of the food chain in the world, right? Out of like 8 billion people,
Yeah.
they have amassed enough audience. There's not that many people that we can say that get 1 million views per video, right? It's just like a
Yeah.
handful of podcasters.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have a lot of help too, right? Like, Lex has definitely had a lot of help getting up to that like big those big numbers and stuff like that. It's funny that you were talking about like other people like quoting your videos to you and things like that, or like bringing up subjects from your videos, because when I was in Seattle, I did a couple I was cast for a couple premium YouTube videos from some like very famous YouTube channels that have actually like been in the news. And one of the videos that I'm in here has 6.7 million views. And people have actually recognized me from that video. And it's not like I'm someone like super famous or super like, I don't think that just because it has 6.7 million that I'm like some super famous person or something like that, but I'm like one of probably 5 people in that video. But when I started working the job at the exotic car dealership, and a couple of the girls there recognized me, they were like, You are so familiar. They're like, were you like in this video thing? And I was like, oh my god, what? Like that like blew my mind. And that's probably happened like 4 or 5 times. Not so much recently because that video was from 5 years ago or something like that, but it's pretty crazy that people actually like will legitimately recognize me from that, and it was like really freaky when that had happened the first couple times, you know.
Interesting. Yeah, send me that video. I want to watch it.
Yeah,
I want to
it's
see what the
super
hype is all
cringe.
about.
It's super cringe. I also have one that I made. I'm curious at what it's at right now. I'm just gonna look it up real fast just to see where it's at. Holy shit, it's at 13,000 views, and that video is just me in that thing. That is crazy. That is super
Yeah.
crazy to
Yeah.
think about that.
Once you get to those
13,000
numbers,
people.
it gets pretty unbelievable. And, talk about like a weird dynamic that we have in the world where you have these
Hmm.
podcasters that have a further reach and influence into the heart and minds of, let's just keep it at America, right? I can't really speak for what other countries
Sure.
do, but they hold the hearts and minds of the American youth for the most part, right? That's probably the
Uh-huh.
majority of the podcast audience. So let me turn this to you, Chase.
Uh-huh.
I've come prepared with some questions that I wanted to ask you. So recently you've had a pretty big, I guess change in circumstances in your life. So just
Hmm.
to rewind this, you're natively from Washington,
Yeah.
and we went to high school
Born and raised.
together. Yeah, we went to Mariner High School, where you graduated from, and then you moved to Texas. How long ago?
I've been in Texas, I think, a little over a year now. Maybe I think we're coming up on 2 years. I'm super bad with like specific dates and stuff like that, but I would say like a year and a half to like almost 2 years now at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you moved there, what was your job? What was your like first job that you got there?
The very first job that I got in Texas.
Hmm.
So when I moved here to Texas, I didn't have anything lined up at all. Like it wasn't like I came and I had a job already. So like when my fiance moved over here, she actually had a job lined up already. I didn't. So I kind of like sat around and kind of like I kind of took some time to get acclimated to what Texas was like and what it's like to be in a completely foreign area with no friends, with no like intimate family of my own. I mean, we had her family down here, but that's not necessarily like my family at that point, right? They're still kind of like strangers to me. They're people that I'm like getting used to. So it's not like I had people that I had lived with my whole life just around. And it's super funny actually. The very first job I got was at a it was at a car dealership, and my job was to call it was to purchase cars for the dealership. Cars that were being posted on like Auto Trader or like Facebook Marketplace or something like that. So I would call them and then I would try and buy their car from them privately. Like I would try and buy it from a private seller for the used car dealership to sell. And I ended up doing that job for 1 day. I got hired on, I did it for 1 day, and I came back on the second day and I like I sat down at my desk and I like logged into my computer and I was like, yeah, all right, today's gonna be a killer day, man. I was like, I did a bunch of like, I shadowed a guy the day before, like all that very first day I shadowed a guy and I was like, oh yeah, this is easy. I've done this before. I can totally do this. I called like, I don't know, maybe like 10 cars or something like that. And I like had worked one out. Like I actually had someone that was like a good buy. And I went to go take it to like the person who like approves the buys. And she was like, let's hold off on that a second. Can I actually have you like come to the office real quick? And we're gonna talk to you real fast. I was like, oh yeah, okay. And I was like, oh fuck, did I fuck something up already? Like day one? I've only been here like 2 hours on day two. What the hell? And they were like, all right, we love you. You're great. Company is taking a totally different direction. The owner of the company is selling the company, and we're firing everyone. So we're no longer buying cars or selling used cars. We're actually a Turo car dealership now. So all we do is rent cars to people. I was like, what? what?
Wow.
And she's like, yeah. So we're gonna pay you for all the hours that you worked. You will just pay you whatever Texas minimum wage is, and we're gonna give you a $500 severance package. And I was like, damn, okay. And I was like, are you sure you're not firing me? And they're like, no, absolutely not. You're awesome. Like, we super like you, and we're really sad. Like, this is really embarrassing on our part because like the owner just like did this flippantly. I was like, damn, all right. So that is how my very first job in Texas went. I worked one and like a third of a day, and then got laid off in like a massive company shift. And a bunch of other people got laid off too, which is crazy because like the guy that I was working with the day before, I called him, I was like, dude, they just like said that they're like shutting down the whole entire company and firing everybody. He's like, yeah, I just heard. This is fucked up. Like, I don't even know what's going on. So that was super weird. That was super weird. That's never happened to me before. So my very first job was a little rocky. It was a bit of a hairy start. I was like, fuck. But that
Wow.
was actually nice because that gave me like a really quick chunk of money though, right? Like to get $500, I probably would have had to have worked like a week or something like that. Like if I was lucky or something, like I would have had to have like sold a couple cars or bought a couple cars because you got paid for buying the cars. So that was actually kind of nice because I just like, I think like equivalently, I don't know how much that I think I mathed it out, but it was like $50 an hour or something like that was basically what I was paid to work for like a day and a couple hours. So I was like, okay, well that's awesome. I got a little chunk of change that I can float on for a little bit longer, or pay some bills or go look for a new job. And so I started looking around for a real first job, and I got hired on at Mercedes Benz. And so I started working at Mercedes Benz, and I was a product specialist there.
Yeah. And product
So
product specialist means you knew everything about the vehicles. So whenever they needed any sort of knowledge, right? That's where you get tapped in. You're like a technical basically person.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I was like the end all be all knowledge base of like everything to do with Mercedes Benz like products. So they mostly focused on like the new stuff because that like they really only wanted me to be like knowledgeable about the new stuff, but because I'm like a turbo car nerd and because I had worked in exotic cars before, I knew a ton about the cars from like every year, like from like dude, the cars from like the 60s and 50s like all the way up to present. So it was a super easy fit for me, and I ended up being like the go-to guy for like just about everything there when it came to like obscure car knowledge about anything, which was a real pleasure. Like that was really really fun, right? If you're like a car nerd, being like the king car nerd is just like as good as it gets.
Right. So after that, uh, you recently have switched employment. Can you tell me about what you do now and when did this happen? Walk me through that journey.
Yeah, so I was working at Mercedes Benz and I was having a super good time, but it just it was kind of like a placeholder job, and it was definitely not that I'm like above anything, right? Like I'm not above any work, but I was definitely overqualified for that position given my past experience, which I did some mechanical engineering before, and I did exotic car stuff. So like I was like way overqualified to do that job. And I was looking for something else, and my fiance was getting pretty pregnant there at the time. She was like 6 months pregnant or so. So I was like, fuck, I have to find something that can support my family a lot better than what I'm doing here presently, which is super fun, but it's not really challenging me in like any kind of significant way. And where I lived in Texas, what is like every single day I would drive past this huge complex of buildings, and it's a rocket farm. So they build rocket ships out there, and I was like, man, I want to fucking work at the rocket place. That sounds awesome. So I had been applying to the it's called Firefly Aerospace. I'd been applying there for like dude, like 7 months or something like that. Like basically the entire time I was at Mercedes, I was just like constantly applying, 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 applying. And finally got to the point where I quit Mercedes and was just going to go do something else because it wasn't really working out super well anymore. And the day that I moved into our new house that we bought for our baby, I got a call from Firefly and they offered me a position there. And so I was brought in and I started working at Firefly, and now I build the I actually build the rocket ships. So like I work on the carbon composite structures, like the actual thing that you see, like the big like tube, and that everything goes in, all the fuel tanks, all the like the big cap that holds all the payload inside of it, like, everything is basically carbon composite on those rockets. That's like what is special about Firefly, is that it's all made out of carbon fiber composite materials. I build all that stuff. I work on all that.
Um, carbon composite, huh? What is carbon composite?
Yeah, so it's carbon fiber, like what you would see in like a fancy sports car, right? Like the wings are made out of carbon fiber, but quite literally what it's latticed carbon like strings. And so they're lattice like end over end like that basically, and they are impregnated with adhesives like glues essentially. And so, kind of like paper mache, they have these big metal tools, is what they're called. They're called tools, but it's basically like a mold. You can almost think of it like a mold. So, for example, they have one that is like a giant aluminum drum. So, to put this in perspective, like how big some of these rocket parts are, um, I think one of them is like 36 feet long and it's over 6 feet tall. So I've been inside of the tubes, after the carbon tubes that the actual like rocket fuselages are made out of, and I can stand up completely straight and it just barely touches the top of my hair when I'm standing up in there. So it's probably like 6'1" in diameter on the inside and like 30 feet long. And how they do it is they have this giant aluminum tool. So it's like a huge aluminum rolling pin. You can almost think of it, that is whatever 6 feet tall and 30 feet long, and they take these big sheets of carbon composite, which is carbon fiber lattice mixed with like adhesives, and they lay it up, they lay it down in like these very specific patterns on it, and they basically just like paper mache, they cover this entire tube with it, and then they throw it in a big oven and they cook it. And after it's done being cooked, the metal aluminum on the inside shrinks away from it, and it kind of like dunk, and you just have a giant carbon straw. You can almost think of. That's like one of the most simple ones. Now they have ones that are crazy complex, that are all kinds of like funky shapes, to build up the different rocket pieces. But that's more or less the gist of like kind of what a carbon composite is. And funny enough, I had this kind of funny realization when I very first started working there. Um, when you get these carbon pieces off, they're kind of like raw, right? Like you have to go in and trim the edges, and you have to cut them down to size, and you have to cut little holes in them where the different connectors go, and like all the different lines run on the inside and things like that. And it's you try to avoid it, but you'll inevitably end up breathing in a little bit of carbon dust. Like you'll get it into your nose just when you're breathing. So when you blow your nose, you'll have like these black boogers basically that will have little tiny lattices of carbon fiber composite in them. And I had this hilarious realization when I like got home from work like the second or third day and I blew my nose. And I was like, oh my God, my boogers are literally carbon composite. They're quite literally, like, they actually fit the literal definition of like organic carbon composite structures. And that was just like a really funny like realization to me, and I was like, man, I wonder if I could make like crazy like booger rockets. Like that was like my like retarded thinking. I was like, oh dude, booger rockets, let's go.
I remember cleaning my rifle and carbon. Yeah, it just kind of it
Mhm.
plasters everything. Um, so
Dude.
this whole rocket science adventure that you've gone into, was this a passion of yours before you got the job, or was it just something that sounded really cool? Because you're into cars. I know you're
Mhm.
into watches, right? You're
Yes.
into you're a pretty you know extreme, I would say, flight simulator
Uh-huh.
uh, pilot, I guess. I don't even know that world at all. But my point is, you're very technical with the stuff that you like,
Mm.
and so I guess did you just land this position and you're like, cool, this is awesome, I can't wait to explore it? Or have you always had this affinity for space travel, rockets, the history of it, much like you do cars or anything else?
Yeah, of course. I'm not like as big a like rocket nerd as I am like a car nerd or like a watch nerd or gun nerd or fighter jets or anything like that. But it was something that always was like just astonishing to me, like aerospace, right? Like I think that's really that's like the bracketed category that you're talking about is like aerospace. And in Seattle they have the Museum of Flight in Seattle, where they have like rocket engines and they have rocket ships and they have replicas of the lunar landers and like the lunar modules and like the lunar rovers and space suits and fighter jets and like all that stuff, right? Like I feel like these things really do go like hand in hand a lot. And I think everybody is pretty blown away by like space travel and like space stuff, right? Like who's cooler, like a fighter pilot or an astronaut? Like they kind of like compete, for the same thing. And like like if dude, everybody thinks astronauts are like the coolest thing ever, right? Like you don't like think about the moon landing or like think about the space shuttle or like the International Space Station and your mind like isn't just instantly blown, right? It's like a whole foreign world. You're leaving the planet. You're doing space flight. You're making spaceships. That has always been super incredible and super interesting to me. And the opportunity to do that, like the company that I work at now works with NASA. Like I never imagined when I was in before I was in exotic cars, I never imagined that I would have an opportunity to drive a Ferrari. I never had a thought that I would be able to drive an Aston Martin or a Porsche or like a classic muscle car of some kind and like have personal time with that. I never thought that I would have the opportunity to work on spaceships, with my actual hands and do those things. And so like that for me, like the opportunity to get to go do that is really incredible. And a lot of the people who work there have come from other pursuits. Some of them have come from companies that build fighter jets because those things are kind of similar, right? Carbon composites and aerospace structures and lightweight materials and technology that's kind of at like the bleeding edge of science and things like that. And even for them, the space stuff is like a tier above that. They just think it's like the craziest thing ever. I mean, it's like it's quite literally the final frontier, right?
Does that kind of level for you, like what's possible, I guess? And what I mean by that is when you say it's a whole new world, right? That I feel like that's basically the same thing when you enter any like really deeply technical field, right? If you whether
Mm.
that's like it could be media, it could be like even something silly like podcasting, right? There's just so much technical aspects. So like the video, the audio, the recorder, the mixers. It's kind of complicated, and you get into biology that's immensely complicated. You get into chemistry, you get into physics, and you get into
Yeah.
aerospace. And so you've done things like because of your car enthusiasm, right? You've worked in an exotic car dealership where you're talking about driving all these incredible vehicles. And now
Mhm.
you're building these things, which is the final frontier, right? Building
Yeah.
literal rockets. Does that affect you in any way of like, you know what? It's a, crazy world out there, but like if I just have a passion for something and I just push forward, I'm able to achieve more than what you thought was possible before.
Yeah. So it's funny because what I meant by it's a whole nother world is it's quite literally a whole nother world. Like it is we're building a moon lander. Like I've seen the moon lander. I've touched the moon lander. I've touched a piece of human creation that is going to go to the moon. And like I think of like Carl Sagan was like one of my huge heroes growing up. Like I have the original like CD set of Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and it's such a beautiful collection of like history and scientific achievement and mathematical achievement and things like that that like honestly just thinking about it like almost makes me like tear up because it's just like such a beautiful thing to be a part of like some of the stuff that like the greatest of greats have done is like is a pretty incredible thing. I kind of forgot your question. Can you rephrase your question again for me real quick?
Yeah, I guess, did this position that you got at this rocket company, did it change your perspective? Did it have an effect on you on
Mm.
being able to achieve, I guess, whatever it is you're setting your mind to, or being able to tap into this, collective consciousness of either ideas or of like physical things that you can accomplish in this world? Like, you know what I mean? Like it might be too soon because you kind of just got that job, but I'm just curious if it has synced in that like, oh, I'm doing this. Like this is a whole new
Yeah.
world, but I'm part of it.
Well, I've definitely so I've been there like over a month by now, right? So like I've definitely fallen into like the groove of things and I'm getting very comfortable with the people I work with and some of the things that I've been tasked to do and I'm starting to like build up some of the tribal knowledge of that process. I'm definitely no veteran of it or anything like that, but for me, I feel like I kind of fell into it. Like I don't really feel like I was the world's most no excuses candidate ever, right? Like I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not like PhD giga brain know everything about this kind of stuff, right? Like it wasn't necessarily my field of expertise. And but it's funny because I've kind of felt that way about everything that I've done though. And I think what's really helped me get the opportunity to do those things is being kind of like a pragmatic, like like well communicating and excited person about it, right? So it's not like they had to hire me because my credentials were so incredible that they'd be stupid not to. It was that I was qualified enough and I had a lot of enthusiasm about it and I spoke really well and I represented myself really well and that's why I was able to get that opportunity and that's why I was able to do that thing. So like when I look back at it, I have had a lot of really incredible opportunities to do things like the exotic car thing was something that I never thought was possible, right? And then I was just able to like, whoop, okay, here I am, I'm doing this. Okay, great. Like, and I'm just like up to speed and I'm running. Or like even before that, when I was doing design work for fire sprinkler systems, that was another thing where um I kind of had this opportunity where it's like I really hadn't done anything professionally before that. That was kind of like my first professional job. And those people that gave me that start to that kind of just like for whatever reason liked me and just put their neck out for me and gave me an opportunity to do that. And then it was on me after that to perform, to rise to that challenge and to provide results and to make mistakes and to learn from my mistakes and grow and try and be a better person at those things. So I feel like to me, it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm gonna do aerospace and I'm just gonna be a rocket guy and I'm just gonna like bash my head against the wall until it just like happens. I feel like I've almost somehow stumbled into it. Like what's I'm trying to remember what the quote is, but it's like something to do with like seizing opportunity. It's basically like opportunities will come to you and you'll have some luck and it's kind of up to you to like make it happen from there type thing, right? Like that's how like really big things happen for even like legendary companies like Microsoft and Amazon and things like that is like you're going to be presented an opportunity. It's up to you to seize that opportunity. It's up to you to have your things in place to be able to actually make good on that good luck, right? It's good luck that they called me back. It's good luck that for whatever reason, my resume was interesting enough that they wanted to talk to me and they wanted to hear a little bit more about Chase, right? That's my luck. That's like the cards falling in my favor. But then me being able to seal the deal is what actually gave me the opportunity to do those things. So like it's like luck plus opportunity plus like initiative equals like success in those regions. And I think that that's something that I've been really lucky to have naturally, where I don't I don't feel like I've really had to work that hard at it, selling myself or presenting myself well or anything like that. Do you feel like that answers your question well enough?
I think it'll do. The like the way you described that, I really, I guess, feel close to that as well, because I the current
Hmm.
role that I'm in at Microsoft, I feel like kind of came to me the same way. Like I'm like a business program manager, but I didn't necessarily have any experience in that world at all. I got here because I got an apprenticeship for 4 months, right? And during that 4 months,
Uh,
you are literally performing the role, right? So you're under your manager, you have projects, and you're just under a microscope. And if you perform well, they can extend the full time offer. If not, they can say la vie. And so like I kind of fell into this very fortunate position where I basically had like a 4 month interview, right? To where I'm performing, I'm
uh,
communicating, I'm running projects and programs, and I got a role where most of my colleagues, right, have their MBAs, right? That's a business program manager at Microsoft is typically somebody that's tenured in the field, and I had zero experience in it. Um, and I do have like that. I think what you described is sort of like an imposter syndrome, at least a little bit. You're like, oh, this is weird.
yeah,
I'm kind of here. Like, I don't know what's going on
definitely.
for the most part,
Yeah,
but I can hang, and this is strange. Like, I can do this.
yeah,
It feels very weird. So, because this is a point of kinship that I have with you, I'm going to ask you, since you're so fortunate to be uh, you know, consistently in these positions where, yes, you are able to, you get that shot on the goal and you're able to perform and do it. But that allows a lot of room for a person to not really be retrospective enough or constructive enough, or like say you were in the same position as you were, but you didn't get this job, right? Or you didn't get that
uh-huh.
exotic car deal. Like those are just things that happen due to fortune and your ability to execute on the I guess on the what
An
am I thinking of?
opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually the word that was escaping me.
Yeah.
On the opportunity
Okay,
to be
so
able
the
to do it.
the quote I was talking about is, it's so this is the quote. Success is where preparation and opportunity meet. That's kind of what I was trying to like, that was the like X I was like aiming at right there.
Right. And you got I guess your knowledge base and everything else just because of you were a genuinely curious person, and you've built up a lot of deep technical knowledge about a lot of the things that you care about. And so you were able to not only that, but combine that with your natural, I would say, communication skills, right? It's not like something that you sat there and like wrote a bunch of essays and critiqued yourself, I would assume.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but you
No,
probably had
I'm not
this
that, I'm not that guy.
natural, right? You had this natural charisma.
Yeah.
And I guess that's my point is you sort of stumbled across this. This is an unelegant way of putting it, but maybe both you and I have stumbled across this. So like, hey, we're in a pretty good spot in our lives. This could have been much worse. It's like we've got the opportunities, and we're very fortunate. We
Yeah.
have we both have women that we really deeply care about. We have children. We have a house, and we have a career that we both really
Yeah.
enjoy. Extremely rare. We are the top
Right.
1% of people that try to achieve this endeavor of the American dream, and we've achieved this relatively young. But with that comes a trap of not necessarily needing to be retrospective and be like, okay, where are my faults? Where am I messing up? How do I keep this thing going? At least for me. So do you have some sort of mechanism to be able to stop and be like, this is what I think I'm doing wrong. This is where I might improve myself. Like, do you have a
All
person
the
or
time.
people? Like, yeah, how do you go through this with yourself?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. There actually something like that happened today. So like, That happens to me all the time, and it mostly happens when I work around other professionals that are really, really good. It becomes super obvious to me that I have a lot to learn and I have a lot of room to grow. And if I want to be better than myself yesterday, that I need to learn something, I need to acquire something today. So, like, for example, today at work, we were looking at one of the nose fairings for the Alpha launch vehicle. You can look this stuff up later. I'm sure we'll watch a video of this like rocket go up or whatever. I'll point these things out to you. But it's the big at the very tip of the rocket. It's where all the payload goes, and it's like a big clamshell that splits apart like this. And there was this little section here where the laminated material had kind of like separated apart, and you can go up and you can tap tip 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 tap 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 tap, and it'll make a different noise as you go through this material. And I like again I'm surrounded by these people that are so gifted, they're so fucking smart, and I want to be like those people so bad. And like every day I just think about like how much stuff I don't know, and like I'm very cautious to be like, oh, I'm great, like I know what I'm doing, like I can totally do this thing, or something like that. Like I'm very much like I'm just like, dude, I'm like functionally retarded. Like 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 I know I'm better than functionally retarded, but I treat myself as if I'm functionally retarded, and like I really try hard to like learn as much stuff from other people. But I had proposed like a theory. I was like, well, okay, well, why are we seeing these like delaminations? Is it because of this? Is it because of this? And there was one of the MEs, one of the mechanical engineers was there, our manufacturing engineers was there, and he was like, oh no, it's because there's like a foam thing mixed with this carbon composite by this like resin layering that's by the aluminum honeycomb. And I was just like, I was like, he's so fucking smart. I was like, how does he know that? How would he know that? And I was thinking, I was like, when when did he learn that? Because there was a point where he didn't know that. When did he learn that? I was like, how would you know that? And like that happens to me like every fucking day. So like to me, like I don't feel like I'm the shit at all at any of that stuff, or like even and okay, it's easy I think for us to fantasize when we're talking about spaceships and rocket technology, how you can be humbled by a genuine rocket scientist, right? Like I don't think it's hard for you to imagine being confused by how a fucking rocket engine works. But imagine being confused about why a salesperson is so great, right? Like take yourself back to the exotic car side of things where um I would watch these salespeople work and they're so good. And it's like it's another humbling experience. They are the rocket scientists of car salesmen, which maybe doesn't sound like that great of a title to have to be the rocket scientist of car salesmen, especially used car salesmen. But there's a beautiful art to it that's equally as humbling as being next to a a Carl Sagan, right? Like or an Eric Weinstein. As your comparison, like you just feel super inferior next to an Eric Weinstein. Like you can't even hope to understand half of what that is, and you're just like, dude, how do you even like? How do I get there? Like the path is not clear, and it's not obvious how I get to that place. I felt that same way about professionals in other situations. I felt that way about the fire sprinkler fitters, like the guys that actually went out into the field and installed the pipe and like put the threads on the end and like put it up. Like they had this like third eye, this like sixth sense for how these things would go together. They had this understanding like beyond just like the lines on the blueprints, right? Same with these manufacturing engineers, same with these car salesmen, same with these project managers, like all those things. So like it's super easy for me to be humbled because I've been surrounded by I feel like some of the smartest and greatest people in their respective fields, and compared to them I just feel like that imposter syndrome, like super inadequate. And I know in my heart of hearts that I actually have that I'm pretty good and that I pick up on this stuff quickly and that I do a really good job. And I've gotten compliments from those people being like, wow, I'm impressed. Like you picked that up super well and you did really good. But to me, that still feels like nothing. I'm like, I'm still not that guy. I still don't know that thing. I still don't. I still didn't problem solve perfectly, or like I didn't know that the fibers worked with the thing like that, right? And like I feel inadequate in that way. And that's what humbles me down and makes me want to like learn more and be better and like take on more responsibilities and do those things.
What do you think is that part of you that says, I don't know enough or wants to learn this part? Do you think that's a feature uh, that's just ingrained inside you, and does it serve a certain purpose? Do you think it's just there by default just because you've lived your life a certain way and that's just a mechanism that's been activated? Or do you think this is a very human thing of you? And if so, I guess, what does that speak about humanity? What does that speak about us as people? Like, why do we give a shit that other people are so proficient and so masterful and so, you know, just beautifully able to perform something like that sixth sense you're talking about? That part of yourself, why do you think it's there? And do you think this is a biological thing, or do you think this is just something that you've put up at the hierarchy of meaning for yourself, and that's how you just kind of execute your life? Like, what do you think?
Uh, I think it's a consequence of natural curiosity. Um, to me, I think that's what it mainly is because like I remember for me, my dad was like a huge contributor to that type of natural curiosity because dad always had like something kind of cool going on, right? He always had like a hobby. There was always like a boat, like a little RC, like a race boat being worked on, or like a little electronic piece being soldered together, or like a cool car that was he was telling me about, or like a ridiculous story or something like that. So like I think for me is like I've always been pretty naturally curious, but I've always been on like the just like the cusp of being just barely smart enough to understand it. So there's always been that like great beyond, right? Like maybe if I was like a super genius, maybe I wouldn't feel that way. If I was like 210 IQ, or I just excelled perfectly at everything I did, and I was like the top of the typey top of my class or something like that. Maybe I wouldn't feel that way. Maybe I just feel that way because I'm kind of squarely average, but I'm really trying my best to make the most out of it, and that makes me just barely above average in those regards. So for me, I think it's just nature or nurture or a combination of the two things for me that does that for me. But really, it's just me being blown away by the world that we live in. It's just me being dazzled by the technology that I'm surrounded by. It's me being dazzled by the courageousness of war heroes and scientists and engineers and problem solvers and novel thought that propels me that like a little bit forward because it's like, oh man, that's like such a satisfying and ingenious way to solve a problem. Like I wish I could do that. Like I have problems that I wish I knew the magic solution for. If only I was those guys. How do I become those guys? So like I guess really good role models is kind of what I'm talking about. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I'm thinking more deeply though. Um, like, why do you think human beings, like, what role does that play in our evolution? Let's take this at a very technical level.
Mm-hmm.
We clearly have, if you zoom out, right, take our
Yeah.
individual selves and you zoom out at a civilization level, at a species level, human beings have this weird innate thing to
Where does that
progress.
where does that drive come from
No,
in
like
humans?
forget that it comes from, but like it's here.
It's here.
It's clearly taken us somewhere like that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, is this an emergent property of evolution? Meaning it happened just because you put some stuff together, or was this a sort of intentional, I guess, coding of our program? And as soon as you get into intention, right, you kind of get into like
It
a
becomes a
woo
little
woo.
spooky.
Yeah, a little like,
Yeah.
oh, like, what is this all about? But I think it's kind of silly to say that, oh no, it's not intentional. It's just happenstance that, we sort of built this thing. It's sort of like a 50-50, right? I mean, if you think about it, because if you make the claim that no, it's not intentional, that's a claim. You're saying it's not intended, right? It's not like, hey, the
Sure.
default would be it's an emergent property, because you
Yeah.
can't really say that either, right? What's your stance on? I guess where do you think that comes from in our deeply biological sense of this? I guess beholding to beauty, but not only that, but wanting to instill that in yourself and trying to execute better based on the things that you've seen as well.
Well, I would have to think it probably comes down to like some kind of survival mechanisms if you really pressed me on it. I think it's intentionally unintentional, if that makes sense. I don't necessarily think that, again, because like you know this about me, other people don't know this about me, or may not know this about me, but like I don't typically like ascribe things to like higher powers or like things like that, right? Like I personally am like an atheist. I don't believe in a God. That doesn't mean that I'm not like spiritual or something like that, but I don't like think that there's like a greater purpose necessarily. Like I don't think that we're like created in the image of a superior and that's why these things are like that, right? Like I don't believe that we're like genetically endowed with some superior purpose from like a god or like a creator like above us. I believe in like biomechanics and naturalism and just kind of like physics and chemistry, right? And things just kind of happen the way they happen, like 1 + 1 = 2, like the atoms collide with each other and they produce X physics results type thing. So I would have to think, and it perhaps it's a bit of a boring answer, but it would probably just have to come down to survival. I would think that at some point, like you see like think about the feeling of satisfaction you get from like winning at something, right? Like think about like when you kick that perfect like soccer goal, or you throw that like perfect basketball hoop, or you catch the perfect fish, or you hit the perfect shot, or you shoot down, you best your enemy, or you best your environment in some novel way. Like that particular brand of satisfaction that you feel, that like excitement and that like rush of victory, I think is what you're talking about that propels that forward, right? Like I think those that when you have a um significant like scientific discovery, I bet you get a similar feeling to like being a caveman and like spearing the fish. It's like I'm sure that it has to be like a similar sense of satisfaction and gratification and like a similar feeling of this like conquering, right? And I would guess that that's where that comes from. Why are humans driven in that way to feel those things? I don't know if I could tell you in any kind of satisfactory way why they're like that.
So when you say you're like, put it crudely, a man of science, right?
Hmm.
What do you think life is all about? And I mean that in a very technical sense, like the biological life, to your best. And I know we're all, everyone is, and this is funny. This is where even the best biologists, physicists, whatever, we're all just guessing at this thing.
Fall
So,
apart. Yeah.
so this is a truly level playing field when I ask you this question. What's
Right.
up with life? What, like,
Why is life an emergent thing? Why is that happening?
forget about why, but like, give me the rundown. When you think about life, what do you think about? Like, what's up with this thing?
So when I think about life, I feel like there's two sides of it, right? There's like the mechanical side of life, like what again physically is happening, chemically is happening, like how do these things come to be? And then there's like more like spiritual, philosophical side. So like I feel like
Hmm.
as a human, your purpose for life is to experience the earth and feel all the human emotions, feel love and anger and happiness and sadness, and do those things and discover things about the world around you, and to enjoy the company of others, and to like enjoy all the things that we enjoy doing as people, right? That's like kind of what I feel um like your purpose is as like a human on the kind of like more, I don't know what you would call it, social sense of things, right? Like some people, like I've talked to people that are like super Christian before, and they're like, "Oh, well, you're an atheist, so like, what's the point of being alive then if like you're not doing it for God or something like that?" I'm like, the point of being alive is to be alive, is to like experience things, it's to have moments with people, it's to like enjoy your time here for what it is. Mechanically, though, I feel like boringly enough, it could just be like a Rube Goldberg machine of coincidence and happenstance that really doesn't actually technically have a greater meaning than unto itself, if that makes sense. So, whatever, the planets aligned, the asteroid crashed on Earth and brought water, which turned into vapor, which mixed with the was static electricity, formed a little atom this way or a cell this way or whatever, and that turned into this, into that, into, next step, next step, next step, next step. Okay, now we're like getting into complex organisms and things, like obviously I'm skipping a lot, but okay, now there's lizards, now there's people, things like that. So like I feel like mechanically, I don't know if it's I don't know if it's like the most philosophically deep thing. I feel like there's more interesting conversations to be had about maybe like the more spiritual side of things that I explained previously. Because for me, I just kind of look at it as like a mechanical. It's like a snowball effect. It's just kind of what it is. It's just how it turned out, which is kind of a boring solution to the the whole thing.
That's very interesting you think like that. Because boring, like
It's
that
almost
makes it,
too like
yeah.
predetermined. That's what I mean by boring. Is like
Yeah, just I guess I'm confused about this, and here's why. Here's where it kind of laid my confusion into your thing is,
uh,
yes, we have the boring mechanical stuff, which is over billions and billions of years. There's going to be these gene mutations, and you're going to survive as a species, as an individual life, depending on the environment that you're in, and depending on the traits that you have that best suit the environment, and obviously the just the dumb luck. Because if you're,
yeah,
if you're around 11,600 years ago, or 12,000 years ago when the Younger Dryas happened, a bunch of meteors strike the Earth, presumably. It doesn't really matter how suited you are for the current environmental, right? You're just like,
yeah,
okay, hopefully,
it
but
is what it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is what it is. But you take that, and I think there's a plus in there in the equation. Plus the, for example, the cloaking mechanism of a gecko, right?
Uh-huh.
Or an octopus. Like there, it's not mechanistic in a sense of like, yes, you just eventually through random gene mutations, like, okay, you don't go from, hey, a gene mutated here in 1,000 different places over the next 100 million years, in order for this mechanism to sense the world and then turn into the color that they're perceiving. That's a deeper level, I think, of meaning and of I guess intentionality behind the actual mechanism of doing it, or all those orchids that that replicate the female bee anatomy, and they smell like it,
Uh-huh.
and they
Yeah.
attract the male bee, which will basically have sex with it, right? And to get its and so there's a lot
Can
of
I
deeper level things.
can I provide you with an example that you may find?
Hmm.
Oh, well, I'm curious. So, um, this is Carl Sagan's Cosmos. There are crabs in Japan, the samurai crab, and the backs of the crabs look like a shogun mask. Like think of like a samurai warrior, right? They have like the crazy like demon teeth and like the big noses and like, like it looks like a samurai's like headdress, right? Um so there are these crabs in Japan, and there was some artificial natural selection that was happening where fishermen would, so I guess it goes like this timeline wise. The samurai are invented. People discover samurai armor. Humans, for whatever reason, decide to adorn themselves with these masks. These Japanese fishermen are fishing these crabs, and a Japanese fisherman pulls up a crab, and the back of the crab, like the actual like the top of the crab that you would see, is wrinkled in such a way that it resembles the mask of a samurai. And because of this fisherman's spiritual beliefs about reincarnation or whatever, he believes that this crab is a reincarnated samurai. And so he tosses the crab back into the water, but he keeps all the other ones. But because so many Japanese people have reverence for the samurai, this is happening amongst thousands of fishermen. Every time they pull up one of these crabs that looks like a samurai, they toss it back in the water. This is a true story. This has really happened. So now all of those crabs look like samurai. They all have little samurai faces built on top of their husks. And it's by no accident that that happened, but there was at some point a random mutation to mutation to mutation to mutation to mutation where just by pure coincidence, pure luck, this crab had a back that formed vaguely in the shape of a samurai mask, and it was thrown back into the water, ad hominem or infinitum or whatever, until they all look like that now. I mean, what do you think of that kind of example of like that's that's an example of unnatural selection, but kind of also natural selection, right? Because these guys aren't intending to create crabs that look like samurai or something like that. They're just tossing them back out of superstitious belief, essentially. But you're basically getting the same effects of natural selection that you would with like the chameleon, which, you're saying like, hey, isn't there something kind of like interesting and mysterious about like why would a cuttlefish be able to like change its camouflage? Why would an octopus be able to like morph into the ground? How is that something that could just mutate naturally over time given the circumstances of its nature? Like, what would you say about that example?
I would say that to me, all these things live in like a multi-dimensional space, all happening concurrently. Um, I think it's a false equivalence to say that because of human intervention, you have a physical thing that resembles something, and the capability, a very, very complex capability, a multidimensional capability of perceiving your surrounding, understanding what light waves it's emitting, which frequencies, uh, which is what, it,
In reference to like an
light.
octopus's
light
camouflage, or
light is
something
an
like that, right?
electromagnetic wave, and so you're
Right.
perceiving an electromagnetic wave just like we are with our eyes. And when we see color, we're associating some sort of perceptual meaning onto it, with which we can see the color red or green or whatever. And so that is happening, and then you have to match that to this camouflage thing at some base fundamental level. So in no way, shape, or form could that have been created through something like human intervention. It doesn't matter how many how many octopus we capture and throw back in. You can't select for that, right? That's a
And
mechanism
in
that
that
comes into play.
yes, you're correct in that specific circumstance, but the idea here about bringing up the crabs is that like here's an example where you can see the math happening before your eyes. It becomes a slightly less mysterious process when you think about, well, it fucking looks like a samurai, so we throw it back. Therefore, the ones that get thrown back don't get captured, don't get eaten, get to mate, and pass on their genes. Their genes naturally make other things look like samurai, right? Like it's a faster way to just like kind of cut through the mystique of how nature determines how these things evolve. I can't give you a super great example on how chameleon camouflage has evolved or something like that to quote your specific example. I know there's other examples in nature of like seemingly mysterious adaptations. I know one of the main ones that like certain like I've watched a lot of like Christian versus atheist debates or whatever back when I was younger. I don't really watch those anymore or anything like that. Um, I'll spare you the side tangent on that for now. But one of the main sticking points is like the eye, right? Like that for a lot of people is like a really mysterious organ that seems so complex and like so well suited and so intricate that it must have had like a designer of some kind, right? And like that has been like the plea of a lot of Christians to atheists is like, well, fucking, how do you explain the eye? Because that's like such a well developed organ. But the eye did not start as like the eye that we have now with lenses and like scones and cones and like all these things in it. It actually just started as a patch of darkened pigment on like a certain uh like fish's head, and like that causes the light to interact with that darkened pigment in a certain way, and then over time like that darkened piece of pigment like forms into like a like like a convex cone, and then like a little membrane fills over it, and now you like kind of have the beginnings of a lens, and then like the pigment gets like a little bit more complex and the lens becomes more complex, and like I think for us as people, it's like really, or like as humans, it's like really difficult to imagine what like 100 million years is. That's like an incalculable amount of time to like process these adaptations like taking place. But like it's pretty well understood how the eye formed and like how it came to be now. And for me, I believe that our common understanding of how it happened now is actually how it happened. So for me, it's not like a super huge leap to think like a chameleon's camouflage has evolved that way, or a cuttlefish's camouflage has evolved that way, or like some emergent behavior of like a certain creature has evolved that way, or some other random survival mechanism. I mean, there's like ants that like shoot glue out and like all that kinds of crazy stuff, right? Like nature's full of really, really surprising and interesting adaptations. For me, none of those are like beyond explanation that way, if that makes sense to you. Like, what say you about those principles? Like, how do you feel about those things?
Um, well, first, let me interject I'm also an atheist, right? So
Hmm.
I'm not trying to Jesus smuggle into any of these conversation or into any of these like specific points.
Yeah.
But what I am always struck by is that I think that multiple things can happen simultaneously. I think it can also be the fact that the eye was constructed through purely survivalistic, like Darwinism.
Happenstance.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
happenstance plus Darwinism and all that stuff, because that is also the case, right? But I think there's also an unknown element, which is what's that other stuff? Because yeah, okay, we can talk about cuttlefish and whatever and these orchids that replicate a bee so that it could get bees to basically fuck it. Like, okay, sure. Let's just say we accidentally or happenstance got that through billions of years of evolution. We're human, and we have a deep enough layer of meaning to now purposely, right? Just like those samurai crab, and just like we do with CRISPR, and just like we did with wolves, we turn them into dogs. Now, forget the human element and just zoom out. You're observing this thing happening. You now have life specifically interjecting in the evolution of life and changing the course.
It's
So
like people, right? Like people's
yeah.
interaction with things.
So it's not too like why would it be that crazy for me to think that life has an agenda if we at this point have evolved enough to give it an agenda, So when we made wolves into dogs, we specifically wrote that script essentially for 20,000 years.
When we throw
And
the samurai crabs back into the water.
yes, exactly. So now you have this perspective of, okay, just zoom out, like, forget that you're human and yeah, la di da, but now you have life. If we're just defining life as life, directly interjecting and specifically coordinating the evolutionary process. So it's not
Right.
too crazy for me to think that, like, okay, we have all these plants that we now understand can react to its kin being eaten, right? There's
Uh-huh.
like fucking I think it's like cabbage or something. When they hear a certain frequency of like a certain animal chewing on its leaves, it like sends out a distress signal and like and is basically able to communicate with its environment and its kin. They're like, hey, there's some shit happening that we don't like, and that's associated with it being eaten. Um,
Right.
and then we understand that the mycelium network, right, which is
The
essentially
mushroom spores and stuff. Yeah.
it's well, no, mycelium is the thing responsible for mushrooms. It's an underground network that basically underlays
Uh-huh.
most of soil, and it
Yeah.
connects trees together. It connects, like, for example, if there's like a parent tree that shot off a spore or something and it planted another tree, like say two apple trees, they exchange information and carbon and elements between each other favorably, so they understand whose is its kin, right? So through
Yeah.
this mycelium network, they're able to communicate to have this whole vast thing. Like, it's not that crazy for me because we're always figuring out different ways of, like, oh, nature is actually a slightly more intelligent than we thought, and the bar just keeps getting higher. It's like, it's not that crazy for me to think that, yeah, maybe nature does have like a sort of trajectory or a purpose or a meaning or an objective, a program. Zoom out on humanity. What have we done, objectively speaking? We have always, as far as we know, try to get bigger, better, faster, stronger at everything. At every newest kind of, we go crazy. A lot of the stuff that we
To a
talked
fault,
about earlier,
almost.
like, you have this incredible sense of curiosity of finding things that other people do as deeply meaningful, and that you should maybe try to adapt that and become better and adapt some of the characteristics. Like, that's driving somewhere, right? That's going to get us to some crazy place because humans are innately like that. And so, okay, so you have this, like, I guess, is it crazy for me to think that, like, if you have life happen on Earth, like, if its main objective seems to be, through all species that we know of, to survive, right? That's basically like boil it everything down. If you were to,
Uh-huh.
it'd be survive would be probably the top, one of the top of the list,
Well, because if you're
right?
dead, you don't to do much of that selecting.
Right. And in order to survive, you would need in this objective of how do we span across the cosmos or whatever it is. Like, being stuck here
Yeah.
on Earth is a sure way to die, 100%.
Right.
Like, that's where I'm coming from, and I guess I can't really ground any of my like feelings about this in any sort of concrete manner, but it definitely feels like there's some weird shit going on that's clearly, to me, beyond Darwin and beyond just the mechanistic side of things, or else what's the point here? That wouldn't really be, like, I feel like a lot of the apex survival microbes and what, they're already, like, can't basically die. There's things that are immortal, right? But there's this
Yeah, I think like
consistent.
crabs are a random example, right?
Mhm.
Or not crabs, sorry. Lobsters, I think, are like a random. Like there's forever lobsters or jellyfish or something like that.
And there's things that have been around for hundreds of millions of years. Like, fungi have been around for much longer than us. I think we're the descendants of fungi, right? I think we share a common ancestor with fungi. So there's all these things that
Probably.
are like, hey, we're basically good enough. But that's not really the program here to me. I think the program, to me, my perspective is, you need to always constantly achieve something bigger, better, faster in order to X. And I don't know what the hell that X is.
You know, um, I had never really considered, you were talking about like kind of the artificial selection that people do. I had never really considered artificial selection from the standpoint of like other creatures that may have existed on Earth. Like, think about, for example, I mean, I've seen plenty of videos of like other random creatures like working together, right? Like, I think an obvious example is like the little suckerfish that like are on the bottom of sharks, stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah, like
Like, there could almost be, yeah, there could almost be like a form of artificial selection amongst like those things, right? Like the sharks could kind of choose like what suckerfish they want on, or I don't know, maybe the sharks can't choose. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's the suckerfish that choose the type of sharks that they want to survive. For example, so I guess I had never thought of it that way. Like, imagine that I don't know, orca whales for whatever reason decide that they like this type of fish, so therefore they don't hunt that fish anymore, so therefore that fish grows in some kind of way. Like, I suppose you could almost think of that as like a, again, kind of like a natural um you know artificial selection of some kind. So that's an interesting concept. I hadn't quite thought of. I don't know if that's like something that you intended to say specifically, but that's kind of like where you had my mind thinking. I don't know if I totally agree with you that there's like anything more mysterious happening than just the Rube Goldberg machine of physics performing. And what I mean by that is like a Rube Goldberg machine are those crazy things that would happen in cartoons where it's like, the like little glass bead like rolls down the trough and like hits the paddle that like flips the spinny wheel that like collapses the accordion blower that like pushes the fire up that burns the kettle that snaps the string that swings the axe and like yada yada yada, and all this thing does is like pushes down the like lever on a toaster and makes like toast, right? Like, that's like the idea of like what a Rube Goldberg machine is, basically like a really complex needless like circuit of things that happen kind of haphazardly in no particular order that get you to like an end result that's seemingly innocuous. I don't know if there is anything more than that that's happening. Like, I don't know that I would really be comfortable saying for sure that like, oh no, there is a guiding hand. Um, it's probably a combination of those things. It's a combination of just true, pure mechanics, of just science, of just atoms doing what atoms do, and the mathematics behind those things, and the natural unnatural selections that I've talked about of humans throwing the crabs back, of orcas liking a thing, of suckerfish, what do you call that, when like two random like species work together, symbiosis or like
yeah,
mutual
yeah. It's symbiosis,
mutualism.
and it's
Yeah, yeah.
also, but what you're describing is also like probably thousands or millions of mechanisms that are. It's called the like the biosphere. Like everything's dependent on each other in reality.
Hmm.
Like right, I mean, like we're all dependent on the bees for our food because they pollinate,
The trees for
etc.
oxygen.
Yeah, yeah. It's all an ecosystem. I think that literally. Well, I mean, that evolved to be part of each other. Um, I guess, does the human element break the fourth wall? Does the fact that we're trying to get to fucking Mars, that we're trying to solve physics, like that's not a Rube fucking what do you say, Goldberg? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Rube Goldberg machine.
Rube Goldberg, like that's like
Yeah.
a kink, right? That you have your Goldberg
Right.
machine up until humans are
Yeah.
like, stop. I'm gonna watch this beautiful ballet dance, and
Yeah.
life and biology and everything that makes sense to survival, to Darwinism, to kind of takes a pause, and it's like, why do we give a shit what that surfer does? Look at that 80-foot wave. That's pretty sweet. That
I
is, I would say, an exception. No.
I do think there is an escape velocity for the consciousness that humans have that have kind of like fucked the natural order of things for sure.
So what is
Um,
that, I guess?
oh man, I don't know. I suppose at some point you just get smart enough that you can start to like crack stones together to like create fire and like start to manipulate your environment and just like on a curve that just doesn't really like again has that like escape velocity, right? So like escape velocity is the amount of energy it takes to like escape the gravitational pull of like the earth, right? It's like how much, it's the calculation or like the formula for like, hey, if this thing is going this fast, like, or this thing has to go this fast to like eject from earth and like leave that area, right? Like it's the escape velocity of nature. Like imagine if nature had a certain gravity that just like pulls everything down and just like keeps the playing field even, right? Like the trees always have to do this kind of thing. Like the the bees live just barely long enough to make hives that last super long. The tigers live just long enough to just keep making more tigers, you know, and things like that. Like humans seemingly have totally just fucking like are not like, not only are we the top of the food chain, it's like almost unfair to even like put us in a food chain anymore to some degree. I mean, like a naked human versus a tiger is a terrible bet, right? But like with our technology, with our society, with our homeostasis amongst each other and things like that. I don't know what that is. I suppose like after some point you just have like so much, the brain was definitely the winning mutation. The brain and thinking was definitely the winning weapon in the arms race of nature. And the way that the brain has expressed itself and the way that humans have won is definitely pretty special from what we see on Earth, at least. Um, I don't know what that is. I couldn't even tell you like when that happens. I know that they're like certain like primates and stuff like that, which if you believe, I don't know, genealogy or Darwinism or whatever, or genetics or something like that, are supposed to be like distant ancestors or like close ancestors to humans. They've been observed like mimicking more human behaviors and like using like more human tools and things like that, which is kind of interesting to think about, that we could be like accidentally spurring on the like psychological evolution of or like the mental faculties of other creatures just by like proxy, which is kind of crazy. I don't know what is your theory about how, like, why is it that you think humans are like such a exception to the rule, so to speak?
Interesting question. Before I answer that, I would like to say the escape velocity, I think, is a great analogy that you put forward.
Hmm.
And just to be the devil's advocate here, because I love, if you haven't noticed, I love being the devil's advocate, even when I don't really have a
Uh-huh.
point to drive. I love to challenge your thinking. I love to just interject just a small little thought that makes you think. That's my goal in a lot of these podcasts, by the way, is just to
It just
kind of
pits people off.
yeah, because like
No, I'm just teasing.
you get to live your life
Yeah,
and do your own thing and have your own opinions, but how often do you get those opinions
like
like
push back on.
pushed back on? Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
let me to to use your own weapon against you, the escape velocity. I think that is the crack in your in your logic, the unexplainable. That is the UFO of the Chase Auker, uh, ideology
Um,
of what's
of the
real.
Chase Soccer's Rube Goldberg machine of life is the
It
escape
is
velocity of the
because
unknown
it's
element.
complete horseshit to say, oh yeah, it's all mechanistic until we get to humans, and then okay, clearly that's it's like no. Include
Yeah.
humans in your model. You include humans in your model, and all of a sudden, I think you would need to give a lot more weight on okay, what is this element X that humans are made of, and perhaps that has been a more subtle way that we got to here. That's But anyways, I'll leave it at that, and because I want to answer your question.
Uh,
Why do I think humans are so exceptional? Geez, what a it's hard to answer without me giving my perspective on evolution, right? Uh,
uh,
and I'll try. Okay, I'll try to give it without all the backstory. I guess I wouldn't doubt if it's the case that there was some sort of programming in a very, very neutral sense to computer program. Like, don't think of it as some code that's being executed, but as some sort of programming that was meant to search for a path that led us to be able to manipulate our environment in such a way that we gain certain capabilities to achieve God knows what, right? And I'm literally imagining, like, I close my eyes, I'm imagining like millions of these like just imagine like a neural network just connecting just everywhere, trying to work in its
right.
best to find the best possible solution to things. And we're on that branch of like, hey, what the hell is the best way to achieve X, right? I still don't know what that X is. So we're on some sort of goal or mission as a life force, as a species of life, of biological life on Earth, to do something. I think it doesn't have to be anything spiritual. It could be something silly, like like a scientific experiment by some alien. Could be something. I'm agnostic to what it could be, but we're on some
The
search, and
Matrix or not. Yeah.
matrix or not, and we're executing our functions simultaneously. So if this was like a quantum computer, we'd be doing a great job of traversing every possible outcome on Earth, given that you survive, right? That's
Sure.
like the constant. Like, what's constant is Darwinism. That's a constant. That's like the speed of light of the universe. So you have to pass through that.
Sure.
If you don't acknowledge that, you're dead in the water. But we've got to that brain that you're talking about, and we've got to okay, so it turns out if you put enough meaning behind everything, and you just, and instead of like, hey, what's the best thing for survival, what's going to make me stronger, what's going to make me more feared, what's this, it's like you turn everything upside down, and you go for meaning. And I think that's the way our brain works, right? It establishes meaning in every single thing possible. I think that's the fundamental like axiom that we humans operate on, is like, what is the meaning behind anything? And then you operate from there. And it turns out that when you stack it high enough with enough neurons, right, it becomes this incredible complex thing. So, in short, I think there has to be an objective in order for us to achieve this thing, uh, or uh, or let's say we would just have fizzled out in a sense at like what are those little fucking what are those little things that the little tiny microscopic bears? Oh God, what do they call them?
Oh, bugbears.
Yeah, what are those? I
Oh,
can't
oh,
believe
sorry. Not bugbears. Fucking name. That's a D&D thing. Tardigrades.
tardigrades. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Tardigrades have been
I think
around
they're
for
actually called bugbears.
hundreds of million years, and they can like survive in space, etc. Like, they're good, but I think that there has to be some sort of innate force, like, like in physics, we have the dark force just pushing everything,
Uh-huh.
propelling forward without us knowing what it is. I think there's just some sort of biological dark force that's making us advance ourselves in some sort of direction. I think that's why we're here.
So, unfortunately, it's clear to me that we're still just animals, though, in my personal opinion. I think that there's too much that is just evident to me that we're just animals. There's too much there's too much like protecting your assets. There's too much emotion and feeling. There's too much cancer and biological anomalies. There's too many examples of Down syndrome and mental retardation that shows us that we're just really smart animals. And for me, that is like one of the main like sticking points is like I just don't think that we're beyond the third dimension, really. If that makes sense. Like and what I mean by that is like I don't know if there is it's like to me kind of some of what you're talking about almost reminds me of like kind of the philosophy of like the third eye, right? Like it's a bit of a like a spiritual concept of like kind of like the greater like psychic like kind of like soul energy like kind of like as you had said earlier like kind of like a woo woo nature and I just don't know if I buy into any of the if the woo woo stuff, you know. And I don't know I'm not saying that that's necessarily where you're going with that 100%, but like there's just too many examples when you take humanity as a whole that we're just like highly evolved primates. Like I just don't think that our intelligence is at a level that like I still just feel that we're very much like in the survival of the fittest stuff. Like even though there is like a certain escape velocity for intelligence where like okay, well we've matched or we've beat the escape velocity of the intelligence for the creatures that are around us. Okay. I give you that. But can't you fantasize an environment where humans are equivalent to orca whales in a system of other organisms that are equivalently smarter? Like think about how smart an orca whale is. Like there's a lot of very complex thoughts and emotions and feelings and social structures and like all this kind of stuff happening in orca whale societies. As a random example, I'd imagine that we believe ourselves as humans to be more complex than them with our language and our inventions and how we organize ourselves in our mathematics and things like that. Like, could you not put humans in the place of orca whales and have another like species that's just that much high above us? Like, well, how do you feel about that? Like, why not just like okay, you place another type of creature above us again, like does it just like does our escape velocity not become an escape velocity anymore? Does it seem to not matter anymore at that point? Like what do you think about that? If
I
that
think
makes sense
to
at all.
yeah, I think to be clear, I don't think our escape velocity is from nature. I think our escape velocity, as I stated, it
It's from the
is
creatures around us.
no, no, it's from your fundamental, I guess, understanding that we life happened as part of a mechanistic approach to creation.
Mhm.
I think we are definitely part of life. We are life. We are the same thing as life. And I think life is probing because it doesn't know. It has no. I don't think life knows which way it's trying to go, but it has a certain objective. And it's like I need all hands on deck here, and we got to go parallel with this process. And yeah, I mean, it's all incredibly complicated. And I don't even think that necessarily humans are the apex life. Like I think mycelium is pretty incredible. Intelligence is just
Well,
one thing, right? That kind of
it wouldn't be a Serghei podcast if we didn't talk about artificial intelligence too, which you could almost view as like an advanced form of life as well, right?
yeah, I mean,
I
like
think you could easily fantasize an artificial intelligence that you would consider like a living organism of some kind. That's
I
maybe
think
even
pretty
more
easily.
perfect. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
possibly even more perfect than human life, right?
right. Um, I just don't see the distinction between like, yes, what I want to get to is for you to accept that humans are part of the equation. We just happen to be the most advanced intellectually. That's fine, credit where credit's due. But like, we don't have to end it there, right? We will eventually evolve into something else. That's inevitable as long as we don't. going extinct, right? If we don't, as long as we keep propagating through life, that's just what happens. You evolve, you adapt certain traits, you're going to lose others. And like you said, a million years for us is unimaginable. In a million years from now, humans going to look a lot different. And maybe the modern human is going to be like the orca whale of, whatever you said, of the future, or perhaps we are of the universe, right? Especially if you have this mechanistic approach of like, hey, happenstance, this fucking element met with this element at a certain whatever frequency. Yeah, well, the universe is pretty big. So the probability, if there is
You're
one,
giving yourself some wiggle room.
of life being created here is not
Yeah.
zero. So
Right. Right.
I would say by the Chase model, it'd almost be insane if the universe wasn't abundant with life.
It would have to be that way. Yeah. You're
By
right.
default.
And that's, well, yes, and that's an astute observation. Like that shows your, I think that shows your understanding of my understanding of things, is that like, and that's funny, is like you could definitely make some predictions about how I feel about certain things. Like I don't think alien life has visited Earth in particular, but like I'm pretty sure that alien life would almost mathematically have to exist, just in the how much stuff exists. It would almost make sense that it does.
Yeah. And
Right.
hopefully it had the same
Um,
handicaps as us, right? Hopefully it's not
oh
just
God, if
some
we're
rich kid
lucky.
asshole life that got fucking fed everything by like a little a more advanced life. Like imagine, dude, we grew up in the streets, bro. We were like, bro, we've been around for 4 billion years, surviving, getting smashed by asteroids, and
On
some
that
other fucking life is out
grind.
there. Yeah, some other fucking life is out there that just got like, oh, we're cool, we're protected by
Oh,
two
we're
black
silicone
holes. Like,
based.
yeah,
Yeah, we've lived forever. Everyone's always lived forever. What are you talking
we're
about? You guys
immortal,
died? Ugh,
and we're always
cringe.
perpetually happy. We're just chill, dude. I'm like, fuck you, dude.
Yeah,
You guys are
yeah.
just
They're
some
like,
rich,
we
spoiled
discovered, we
fucking.
figured out the universe a long time ago, and then after that, we just like just chilling. Um.
So
Okay.
okay.
So
So sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Let me. Okay, so you have this in the Chase universe. You have this abundance of life just growing everywhere. Most of it probably in some sort of primordial state. It's just well. Let me take that back. I would say most of it because we have no idea how big the universe is, and even at the scale that we acknowledge, like God help us, like even if it's like a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a percent chance that we even have little microbes, that's still like
Uh-huh.
nearly infinite because you're
Yeah,
nearly infinite compared to the cosmos. So
game changer. Yeah.
you have this life. Okay, so fucking what? Okay, what's the end goal here of the perceptive reality of life? Like the fact that it is like something to be a human, that is like something to be a cat or a dog. What does that add up to? Like, say it is just mechanistic. What meaning, I suppose, does life have in the Chase universe if it's just mechanistic?
Okay, well, that goes back to kind of what I talked about originally, where I had separated those two things, right? I said, hey, there's like kind of a spiritual aspect to this, and then there's like a mechanical aspect. The mechanical aspect is you're a human, you have cells, you die, you have to eat, reproduce, produce carbon, whatever, like the genetics of just like the lived reality of what it's like to be a human, to live and to die, because you just like your body's an imperfect system. But then there's the spiritual aspect of like, okay, well, hey, we can, we're smart. We can think about things. We can conceptualize things kind of immaterially, and we can kind of live beyond our physical constraints, right? Like we can imagine ourselves in other ways. We can pretend. We can fantasize. We can um, experience things like a little bit greater than just like our own physical bodies. Um, so for me, I think like I've there's a lot of quotes that I could bring up that I feel like would make me sound a lot smarter than I am. I mean, one of them is like you know like uh life is the universe discovering itself or something like that, right? Like that's a purpose that you could impose on life. Like, hey, maybe the point of life is to discover the universe, right? Life is how the universe discovers itself. It's how it makes realizations about itself. It's how the universe created life by hook or crook to discover properties about itself. Like that's some way, if you wanted to get like really crazy metaphysical about it, that's one of the avenues you could approach too. um I mean, you could look at human life as a necessity to creating machine life, and maybe machine life is the thing that's actually really important here, and we're just like one of the building blocks to machine life as well. So like, there's another quote is, man becomes as it were the sex organs of the machine world. That's from Marshall McLuhan, which is just saying like, it's kind of obvious that machines are. I think we can all fantasize about machines that are infinitely more intelligent and possibly infinitely more feeling. Like that's a really big Sam Harris philosophy. I feel like I'm maybe like in the same boat as Sam Harris on some of that stuff. Like Sam Harris has a very deterministic view of the world, and he like, I think he would probably agree that like you could probably create like the some of the fears around like AI and things like that, like the almost goes back to again escape velocity. I'm rambling a little bit here. I'll need you to bring me back from the brink of the ramble here in a second. But like um we were talking about that escape velocity. You could almost view machine learning as like another one of those escape velocities, right? Like an intelligence that's just like beyond comprehension, that's just like boop, okay, here we are, we're at the top. Not only are we at the top, we're like not even in the same game anymore. um what was your original question that you had asked me? That's like such
That's all
a
good. We don't
long
have to
tangent.
follow the questions. But
Yeah,
one
yeah.
second, I have to pee. Can I get a
Okay, go ahead.
can I get an intermission?
Yeah,
Welcome back.
thank you. Good to be back in our middle of our conversation about the metaphysics of humanity. A pee break, an apt
That
description of why we're just animals at the end of the day.
yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, that's the perfect analogy to like, yeah, we're just animals, dude. And I
You're
I
just
agree with you.
fucking monkey creature. At the end
Yeah,
of the day, you just have to pee. It's such a
we
waste
are
of time.
just
Like, and
we
you know what's crazy is like I build rocket ships, dude. I have to pee. You know, I'll be in the middle of building like some of humanity's greatest machines, and I just have to pee in the middle of it, and I have to stop everything I'm doing, and I have to go pee.
yeah.
It's such a waste of time.
No, I agree. It's like whenever I get this deep in thought about my own beliefs and everything, it's like you have to stop and then go to work. You're like, okay, that was great. Now I gotta call my insurance. I
Yeah,
got some
yeah,
bill
or like if you're
dispute.
if you like accidentally burnt your hand, you would have to like stop everything. You'd be like, ah, fuck, it hurts so bad. Like you can't just be like, oh yes, I am above these pure human artificial constructs. You'd just be fucked. You'd be like, oh dude, I fucking cut myself. I gotta go to the doctor like right now.
Or
You know.
like even if you're on top of the world of like the intellectual pinnacle of, like Einstein, he died of an
He still
ulcer.
pooped. Yeah.
I was, I was,
He
I was,
still
I
pooped, dude.
was yeah, I was just saying like, yeah, you've discovered more than any human could possibly discover. You made the biggest leaps in physics that anyone could ever do, and then you got an
Yeah.
ulcer and you die. Like,
Yeah.
which
So what?
it's such a sad thought. Like when you think about like, dude, imagine all those Einsteins that died in a car crash. They never got to like, or like, and this, this type of thought you can string back like to, let's say, the caveman times and whatever that means, if
Uh-huh.
we had that, right? I'm recently much less inclined to believe that there was any extended period of time where humans weren't, for the most part, banded together in a civilization type thing, even if it's like, a group of 20, 40, 50.
Yeah.
But say you were, dude. Just imagine you're like in this pack of early humans, like 3 million years ago, and you just have some dude who's just a fucking just absolute nut and can make like a spear right out of just
Right.
about any wood, any like he like makes strings and like makes all these fucking weird fiber. It just makes them all perfect. Makes all your arrows,
And
makes all
you're
your
like,
bows.
dude, why is he wasting all his fucking time doing that shit? Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, we should be collecting berries. And then you like see the great like saber-tooth tiger, and you're like, oh fuck, this is it, we're done. And
Yeah,
fucking Ugg is like,
he fucking harnesses electricity. He's like, "Bzz, bzz, bzz," and everyone's like, "What the fuck is this?" And then the guy gets eaten by a tiger, and you're like, "Guys, did anybody else know how he did this thing?" And like, "No, fuck, god damn it, man!" Like,
we're
well,
like, I don't, we
there
just have the
goes
cave
this
drawings,
fucking.
but like, we're still too dumb to read them. Like, we have no idea. Like,
Well, dude, honestly, it is such a privilege to be in a collective intelligence timeline where we have this
yeah,
like even like dude like the shit we take for granted like verbal language like
uh huh,
before we started recording you were talking about your flight simulator stuff right how you like basically
yeah,
pilot fighter jets and stuff and you do all the
yeah,
call signs and all the radio talk and how
jargon.
every age has its own unique identifying characteristics of how you're supposed to talk on the radio. Well,
Hmm.
that's because of collective knowledge. That's because they figured out in the 40s that like, hey, the reason why you don't say this over the radio and you say that it's more precise, it's more true, it's more representing. Like we can get down to more, you know, including all the cultural and just habitual stuff. I'm just saying it tends to get more and more precise, especially when it comes to military stuff. Like you're not supposed to say like repeat that like over the radio because repeat means hey do that
It's
airstrike again.
dangerous.
Yeah, like
Yeah, exactly. Say
that
again,
has
like
happened,
repeat.
and so you get more precise and whatnot. But like man, just the privilege of like imagine having to build written like or verbal language from scratch, dude. Like I think it's a lot harder than people think.
Yeah, it's infinitely more difficult than people think. I don't even know what the building blocks of that would even look like. Um, yeah, that's a pretty significant achievement. You know what's actually really interesting is I think they've had like what is it, the wolf girl or whatever? Like there was like some chick that was like raised by wolves or something like that. But like language was like something that was naturally difficult for her to like comprehend. And it's kind of curious because like when you think in your head, when you have like your internal monologue is actually like in your native language, which is pretty interesting. Like you think in English, right? Like I don't think in fucking Chasenese. I think in English language. Um, crazy random side tangent, but just kind of reminds me about a little bit of the mystery of the brain. There was this kid in our high school named Yevgeny, and one time he got laid out during football practice, and spoke Russian. They were like asking him how he was doing. They're like, he got like tackled, right? And he had like a concussion for a second, and he like reverted back to his default language. He was like speaking. He was like speaking Russian again for like 10 to 30 seconds. They were like, dude, like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you saying? He's like, just like randomly like mumbling Russian shit to him. And then he like was like, oh, what, huh? Oh, no, I'm sorry. What? Yeah, no, I'm fine. It's cool. It's cool. Which is just super funny to me. He just like got cracked so hard he just like reverted back to his default language. Um,
I was gonna say you're gonna get a lot of this when you're teach like when you're communicating with your child. That's
mhm.
another thing of fatherhood. It's like it's really curious how you explain certain concepts. Like there's a lot of examples from today, even when I was talking to my son and my daughter, and and I would just like you just like use a sentence. You're like, yeah, the reason why we do that because it's more meaningful to, and they're like, what is meaningful? And you're like, well, that's like when you
Like,
feel strongly about, and then they ask you, what's that? And you're like, fuck, dude. And you just keep going down this
dude,
rabbit hole.
I'm like so excited for that part of like teaching little humans things, right? Like that to me is like I don't really. So my child is like 2 weeks old, right? That's like nothing. That's like all she does is like kick and scream, eat and shit. And I'm so sorry, Rain, if you hear this in the future. That's just the fact of how life is right now for you. I'm sorry. Um, but like that, I don't really feel like Father's Day was like, a day or two ago or whatever. But like, I don't really feel like a father in the sense of like, I don't feel like I've imparted fatherly wisdom on another human, right? Like that's for me when I feel like I'll have a Father's Day that's like worth having. I mean, yes, I have done things that fathers do. I take care of an infant, I change diapers and look after them and like pick weird boogers out of their nose and all those kinds of things. But like for me, fatherhood is like being, hey, you little fucker, don't fucking do that. And here's why. Or like, hey, here's something really beautiful and interesting that I would like to share with you. Here's me answering a question that you have about the fundamental nature of the universe that you exist in and like blowing your mind. Hey, here's me sharing a passion that I have with you and hoping that you pick up that passion too or something like that. Or at least that you understand my passion. Um as a random side tangent, language deprivation was one of the things that I was going to talk about, which was just like language actually like really helps IQ a lot. It like helps like form your thoughts and like ideas in your head, and that language deprivation can actually like really fuck people up super bad to not have language deprivation. So there's these things called like feral children. Like I think like Wolf Girl is one of the examples or whatever, like the chick that was raised by wolves. I think that might actually be a hoax. Don't quote me on the Wolf Girl thing, but like um children that aren't like properly exposed to language, they're like fucked up mentally sometimes, and they don't like always like achieve as high as like people that were properly exposed to language. As well as different languages have different ways of like communicating information, and those can kind of like affect like how your mind works as well, which is kind of interesting as a random side tangent. But yeah, I don't really feel like a father because I'm not having those experiences just yet.
Yeah. You know
If
what's
that makes
interesting
sense.
about that is you have these thoughts about imparting things and teaching things, and then just one day you're gonna realize like, oh fuck, it's like I'm probably learning more from them than they are from me. It's
Uh huh.
and that these messages of like parenthood and fatherhood, first of all, everyone's gonna experience them differently, and it's not necessarily that just because I thought of this you're gonna feel the same way or think the same way through it, but like uh it's so impossible. It's like trying to explain to someone how much fun you had at Disney World. It's like you can only do so much to convey the fucking adrenaline you had going down the roller coaster, right?
Sure.
It kind of stops there, and it would be the same thing as like trying to explain your emotions of like watching your child come out of your significant
Be
other.
born. Yeah.
It's like you explained to me, before the podcast, like the C-section that you had to the witness. Like, there's only so much you can do to explain this to me, and that's just one day in the life, right? Imagine that
Mhm.
compounded over 2 weeks now, then 3, then 4, then a month, then 2, and then a year and 2, and you're like, fuck. It becomes so much that there's no way for you to share that with anybody else besides your woman, actually, right? That she's the only other person going through
Yeah.
it with you. And I have a feeling that, much like me, one day you're gonna be like, wow, like this thing that used to be like one or two cells or whatever it is, has taught me more than I could ever try to even teach it, uh, because you're like you're seeing the intellectual progress of humanity, in a sense, embodied in this child, and it's just growing up and growing up, and every day and every week is just something new, something different. She's gonna start smiling, around 6 weeks, I think,
Yeah.
she's gonna start reacting to the dad, to the mom, and she's gonna be genuinely happy just that you're there, and you're gonna do something, and she's
Yeah.
gonna laugh, and you're like, oh shit, and it's gonna just like literally just like fill you these just bursts of
Yeah.
chemicals that are just like you're like, what is this? Where the fuck am I right now? Like these are things
Right.
that I have never been like these buttons in your brains are just sitting dormant. Um, and I think it's very purposeful. It's like this journey, this trajectory of being, we could turn this to being a man, right? Because that's what you and I
Sure.
are, right? We don't know what it's like for the women, but this journey of being a man, it's like the maturity that we have, and I hope I'm portraying my feelings correctly, is deeply accelerated, if not completely new territory that you enter when you become a father. And I think it's really primal. There's something just all this crazy shit that happens to you. It's like meeting your first love, right? Like all these, like, oh, I'm excited. Like this is weird. I
Mhm.
didn't get this around my buddies. Like this is some strange things anatomically going on.
Yeah.
I think the same thing kind of. There's like a package, like a little firmware update that you get when you become a father, and you're just gonna just start learning about humanity, about yourself, and you're gonna start putting things in perspective. You're like, oh shit, like I have a core memory from when I was like 4 and 5, and then watching my kids at 4 and 5, I'm like, whoa, like that's how I was when I that
You're
happened
like,
to
"I'm
me.
fucking them up actively as I speak. This is breaking them right now." You're like,
Unless,
"Oh,
yeah,
no, why did I say that? He's gonna hate Top Ramen forever now."
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm very excited for you because, dude, you're 2 weeks in, man. You're 18 days in, right? And
Yep.
your daughter shares the same birthday as my daughter, which is very strange, June 1st.
Dude, that is crazy. Yeah, that was super wild when you said that. That, like, blew my mind. And I was, like, really, um like, that was really cool to hear that. Like, that's, like, really special to me. I think that's really cool that, like, we share that in common too.
Yeah,
Like,
that
that
is
helped
very.
me, like, bond with you personally, like, when you said that, I was like, "Oh my god, that's crazy." Like, the
Yeah.
synchronicities are just wild.
Well, you might, I'm trying to. It's weird that I'm trying to communicate with you right now as a father, but like you
Yeah.
said, you don't really feel like a father. And so there's a lot of these things that I might say that are like, okay, cool, sounds good. And then hopefully, I'm just hoping that it's a ticking time bomb that explodes, and you're like, ah, shit, that's what he
Yeah.
was fucking talking about.
No,
Uh,
it definitely will. No, I feel some of those things already, right? Like, she'll smile on accident, I guess. I don't know if she's feeling a genuine happy or if it's this fucking random muscles twitching or something like that, but, like, it's cool because, like, there's something, like, recognizable there happening, right? Like, other than just, like, her fucking screaming and being pissed about whatever it is she's pissed about, you know? But, like, even that is, like, somewhat recognizable too. And I think that's kind of like what you're talking about is like when you say like, oh, like that. Well, I remember having this core memory was when I was a kid. And now I can see that in them. It's like you're like recognizing like it's taking you back. And like the humanity and like the most infant of infants, right? Like, and keep in mind, my baby was born premature at 35 weeks. So like even that is like a pretty big difference to a full term child that is like 40 to like 42 weeks or something like that. Like there's actually quite a big difference developmentally between those two things. But like to recognize like something human and like, kind of like this creature, so to speak, right? Is like, oh hey, like she's pissed when these things happen, or it's like, oh, she's kind of happy, or she's okay, or she's comfortable when these things happen. Like to have those like to recognize those things in like the little creature that you made is like really satisfying and is like super interesting and super curious for me.
yeah,
So
and I'm
it's
not.
not that I like. Oh, go ahead.
So I was to say, I'm not gonna speak for all dads right now, but for like me personally, it is the later stages when you're talking about this imparting of wisdom happens, or is capable of happening, is where you really shine as a dad. Because before that, at least me, like I feel like a big oaf sometimes. Like, the kid will fall and they'll be crying, and I'm just like, that wasn't really a big fall. You know what I mean? Like, I think you can get up. I think you can march on right now. And I have
Yeah,
those
yeah,
thoughts, and I'm like, maybe I should be having some sort of like butterflies, like, oh God, my baby's hurt. Like I should,
oh
but I
no,
genuinely sometimes don't. And I'm like, and then my wife swoops in, right? She's like a total angel. Like, I'm so glad she's in my life,
right.
because guys, kids need that part of it. And I'm just there to be like, that wasn't that bad. I'm like, they're crying, mama's cuddling them, like, oh baby, you hurt
Dude,
your knee,
you
whatever.
know
And I'm
what's
just staring. I'm like, I
so
fucking
funny?
saw that. I know you
Dude,
just
it's
did.
so funny because before the podcast, I was like, "Hey, I gotta step away. I gotta take care of something real quick." And it was literally like the little fucking dumb baby had a booger in her nose that was making it hard for her to breathe for a second, which is like the most fucking baby moment ever. And I had to like pick a stupid little booger out of her nose, and we have like some little dumb like scrape like little, like you can think of it like a toothpick. It's not quite a toothpick, but it's like something kind of like that, right? And used it to like pick like little stuff out of their nose or whatever. And I got in there and I went to like pick the little booger out, and dude, the baby was pissed, was so fucking mad that I dare stick something in her nose to get a booger out so she doesn't fucking die, suffocate from not being able to breathe through her nose, because babies only breathe through their nose, which is another dumb ass thing that babies do. And I was like, fuck you, man. I'm trying to help your ass, and you're fucking pissed off. And it's so funny because the nurturing is just completely different, right? Like, and fiance's like so concerned, and it's just like, oh my god, she's so bad. Like, I feel so bad. Like, it's traumatizing for her. You're like sticking a thing in her nose, and I'm like, dude, fuck you. I'm like getting this booger out of your nose. I'm helping you out here. Like, get over yourself. It's just so funny because that's the exact thing that you just described, right? That's like literally the exact thing that you just described. Is like, you just like scrape your knee a little bit, like, yeah, you're fine. Like, that wasn't shit, And
Well,
like I've told my fiance so many times that I'm like, babies are fine. I'm not like a baby person, but the part that I look forward to is like when they're actually like starting to come online, when they're like actually starting to be curious, when they can kind of communicate like what's happening in their head and like what's going on with them, and like ask you questions and like receive information and like have thoughts about them and like start to formalize their thoughts about the world and stuff like that. That's like where I'm super super interested in like stepping in and like being a really big part of those things too. So um it's really good to hear that that is like that is something that's going to happen from you, right? Like
yeah,
that's really great to have that idea gratified.
yeah, it is. I would just say, just remember, you're just a dumb fucking man, and you don't know shit. And
Oh,
so
definitely. Yeah.
these thoughts, they're okay. So it is, yes, it is very incredibly gratifying to like, like A, B, C. What's this letter? B? Oh shit. They just remember
And
this
you're like,
letter. You're
"Hey,
like,
man, that was
yes.
fucking
You're like,
good. Yeah, nice.
you,
Yeah.
like I taught my son the four fundamental forces of the universe, right? Strong, weak, gravity, and electromagnetism.
Uh-huh.
And he remembers them. And I'm like, I feel so proud. I'm like, nice. That's good shit right there. But like, dude, don't push away, I guess, the consequences of even right now, your baby. So the reason why I cried, right? And we're just dumb fucking men. We don't intellectually understand this, but like the reason why she cried, the dude, 2 weeks ago, she was in that baby and she had a timer. She's like, okay, I'm gonna fucking
Yeah.
come out in, for 5 more weeks. It's gonna be chill. It's gonna be tight. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, what the fuck? Belly's being cut up. Someone pulls her out. She's like, what the fuck? And like I was chill.
Yeah.
Everything was cool. And now you have a booger. They can't communicate with you, dude. The only
Right.
possible way
Right.
that she could be crying so hard because she's genuinely confused or thankful, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And so
Scared. Yeah.
and so the interactions that you have with your kids is like, gonna be ingrained in them just deeply and fundamentally. And the more early you are in that experience, the more genuine of a connection that's going to be. So even when they're like 6, 7, whatever weeks old, and they experience fucking dad just sort of holding them just like against their chest, and it's warm and the heart's beating, tudum, 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 tudum. That the neural pathways, dude, are just they're
Are just
growing,
getting
they're
cemented.
syncing. She's smelling you. She's
Yeah.
like, this is dad. He's a protector. He's this. He's that. And so, just give as much love as possible, dude. Even if they're like to me, like even though in those situations, I'm like, dude, like you're
You fucking
whatever. Like
asshole.
you still need to project as much love behind your actions as possible, even if like. Like my wife gets mad at me when I call the kids like fucker, and I'm like, that's actually an endearing term to me. Like
Yeah.
that's an endearing term. So like just put as much love behind all your actions as humanly possible, uh, because
Yep.
even though there might be two or three or whatever before they start talking, they're
They're
gonna
still picking it up. Yeah, they're still getting
yeah
it. Yeah,
yeah
100%. Yeah, for sure. It's not something that I'm like super scared about. At least not at this moment. Like, I don't know, but I know enough to know that it'll be okay and that I'm on the right path with all those things and that I'll do a good job. It's not something I'm super scared about. Because again, like it's not when my fiance and we actually decided to get pregnant together. Like that was a decision that we made to like mutually. It's not like it was an accident that happened where I was like, "Oh fuck, I never thought about being a dad before." Oh no, it was like we tried for like years together. So it was like something that like I had plenty of time to think about what we were doing and what the consequences of that were going to be and like what I wanted to get out of it and those kinds of things, which is really good. That's an advantage that I have that maybe not a lot of other people get, or at least have to come to terms with much quicker than I did. I had more time to kind of feel it out.
right yeah man. Well, that's a very personal journey that I'm excited for you for. It'll be
Thanks.
completely different than what I experienced, and completely different than everyone experienced. And here's another thing that you probably definitely already know just by the virtue of your character. But like, dude, just take everything anyone tells you about parenting, including myself, with a giant grain of salt. You're like, dude, okay, sure,
Dude, so many people just that's
yeah,
bullshit. Like
yeah, like, right,
they were
buddy.
like, "Your life is gonna be hell. It's over. It's gonna cost billions of dollars to have a
Oh,
kid. You're gonna be
jeez,
broke, and
those
everything's
guys.
gonna suck. Yeah, enjoy those fucking diapers all the time." And it's like, dude, it's like not even a big deal at all. Like
But like, yeah, who are
it's
you?
really
Like,
fine.
yeah, it takes like
Yeah,
when somebody gives you parenting advice, particularly, it's like, who are you? It's like, I would take the full context of their character. If they're like a well put together person that just genuinely is a good parent, would okay, sure, yeah, let's take that a bit more seriously. But like, when it comes to like any generation from like my mom, like my parents and further, it's like, do you
they're like, you
guys
gotta beat
know?
them. You
It's
gotta
like,
beat them to death. That's how you gotta
yeah.
do it.
It's like, what the fuck do you guys know about any, like, oh geez, yeah, it drives me
Yeah,
nuts. Like when I had the second kid, they're like, oh ho, ho, like you're fucked now. Like you thought one kid was bad. It's like, wait until they start walking. What? It's like, dude, none of it was as
and you're
bad
like,
as
what are you
anyone ever
talking
said.
about?
It's like all
Yeah.
these people that gave me this advice must have been either completely incompetent or just, I don't know, just didn't give a shit about. I don't know what it was.
Dude, part of me thinks that maybe they were like a lot more immature than we are now, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like every generation gets like thrust into adulthood, maybe just like a little bit earlier and earlier and earlier and things like that. And like, you end up being like, think about like all the shit that you were expected to know about when like you were a kid. Like, oh my fucking god, dude, you had to be like compare like 16-year-old you to like 16-year-old your parents. The amount of shit that you're like online to must have been just like infinitely more. Maybe that's like part of it where they're like I don't know. I have no idea. But I've heard that same thing. They're like, "Oh yeah, you're fucked now." Like, "Oh yeah, just wait. Just wait until this happens." "Oh yeah, what about this? What about that?" And I was like, "Dude, none of it was like that. It was super fucking easy." And I might just be lucky and have like God's easiest baby too, but man, y'all are just dramatic. Y'all made it sound so much worse than it actually was. It's really not a big deal.
Yeah, maybe it's
It's
it's just
pretty.
like a human inclination to share, to project this negativity, right? To just be like,
Yeah.
oh, dude, I remember I couldn't sleep for more than two. It's like, yeah, okay. It's like yeah, me too, man. It's
Right.
like it's not that big of a deal. Um, what I remember and cherish the most, I think, is when like close friends of mine would more or less tell me like the cool parts or the awesome parts. Like those are the parts I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. But with like negative stuff, like say someone's like, dude, you're not gonna get any sleep for the next 6 months. What do you do with that information? You're like, okay, I guess. I'd say
Okay,
I would have
sure.
found that
Yeah,
out
right,
myself.
right.
I'm not gonna prepare my like. What am I supposed to do? I'm not gonna take more naps during the day to accommodate for this. Like, like thanks, asshole.
Yeah,
Like,
but even then it's still not bad. I mean, when they're like a month old or 2 month old, they're sleeping for a good, 4 to 5 hours. I mean, that's like as much sleep as I'm gonna get tonight. It's not any different than like any other fucking day of the week. So like I don't know, maybe that's a big deal for you. Like I don't, I don't know. It's like I think a lot of people just can't cope with that thing. To be honest, like I don't think as I think you know what? Maybe it's just that me and you and some of the people like us were just genuinely more prepared for that kind of thing. Like we're just genuinely more willing to accept those consequences, and we're just genuinely better at handling those situations, and it's actually just not as big a deal to us as it is to some other people. That's been my understanding of the situation.
that's an interesting viewpoint. I do have a very high threshold of things bothering me. I
Uh
can,
huh.
I'm cool, whatever. I can sleep wherever. I can eat whatever. I can
Yeah.
not sleep for however long and
Yeah, you're like a
just do my
reptile.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah. You're just like
I'm
fucking
cool.
I exist and there's a heat lamp and like it's fucking grubs and straw on the ground, dude. Like what? Why are we complaining about things? Like
Yeah. All right, dude.
you know
We're hey, I just sorry to cut you off, but we're upwards of two
yeah,
hours. How are you doing on
right.
time, sir? You got to sleep. You got a baby.
Uh
Go work.
it's it's about that time. It's
Yeah.
about that time. If I had like one last thing I wanted to say that kind of related back to what we were talking about was like uh my dad advice, my preemptive dad advice for everybody is to just like get out of your comfort zone every now and then. Like physically maybe. Like go like be fucking kind of sad and miserable for a little bit. Like go be hungry, for a little bit. Go be sore and go be really hot and really cold and be tired, not because like it's something because it is something that you want to do. Like I think that like you have military training, right? I kind of have military training, but like that's something that like I actually really love about it is like to go out and like be fucking super tired, to go out and be super hungry, to go out and be like irritated and annoyed and things like that, and like kind of overcome those little things. And like, man, after you've been like stuck out in the woods for like 2 or 3 days, like man, there's not a lot that rattles you too much after that. Do that a good couple times, get really hungry, get really tired, get really sore, get really cold, and it takes quite a bit to actually shake your character after a little bit. So that would be my little piece of dad advice there.
Yeah.
Unsolicited dad advice. How do you feel about that? You feel like that rings pretty true?
Yeah. Yeah. We were, like I said to you earlier, we were on a family hike the entire time. My 3 year old and my 4 year old are complaining the whole time.
Just
I'm
fucking hating
tired.
life.
I'm this. My feet hurt. I'm that. I'm like, yeah, dude. I was literally like, yeah. I was like,
You're like,
this
I
is
almost
it
ate
right here.
bugs.
And we, it's funny you mentioned the military. We actually saw a little memorial for three, it's a couple warrant officers and a staff sergeant, I think.
Yeah.
American flags, and they died in some sort of battle. And my kids came up on that, and they tried to touch the thing. I'm like, dude, don't. I was like, don't disrespect that. I was like, that's placed there to commemorate people who died in war, right? And just like, I was just like, the reason why you push yourself and you want to train and you want to, get out of, don't watch Bluey. And you might know what that is later on, right?
I'm sure
It's
I'll
a,
fucking do
yeah,
Paw
you don't
Patrol.
watch
It's already
Bluey or
ruins my
Paw
life
Patrol or
to
whatever
say.
the fuck for 2 or 3
Yeah.
hours straight, is because you need to be able to be to handle a certain, I guess, threshold of shit that
Like
life throws
discomfort.
at you. It's
Yeah.
life is difficult, and in order to be a good, genuinely good person, you have to go through the trials of life, and just toughen shit out. Like the reason why it's hard and your feet hurt is because this is the good stuff. This is the stuff
Right.
that's meant that's worth living for. Like the stuff that you get from the hard, difficult things to achieve is the things that you need to be a solid individual person. This is what builds you.
Yeah.
And I was like trying to explain this. And they didn't give a flying fuck what I was saying.
It just wasn't.
They're like,
And that's
yeah,
where
but my
like
feet hurt. And but it's those things that like will sink in later,
yeah.
hopefully, maybe. But yeah, dude,
Right.
I agree. You should do that because that used to be a normal thing for all humans, and we all went through it.
Right.
Every single human
Yeah.
individual. Which is why I had asked you earlier, like, okay, yeah, you've got this like sort of like pretty comfortable situation, existence, and you keep falling into happenstance in this very fortunate situations. What's your mechanism of checking yourself? And the reason why I said that is because you fucking need that. As a person in the first
Absolutely.
world in America, like I find myself in, like, okay, cool, but now you got to self-impose that. Now you got to
You
go
could be
find.
comfortable. Yeah, you
Yes.
could just be chilling and not have to worry about it and not have to push yourself further. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah. And
I
for
agree.
me, it's the truly exceptional people around me that push me to like be better. It's the people that have sore feet and like still do really good work and still perform good and still make art and still stay up way too late making podcasts and go to work the next day and build rocket ships.
Low key talking about
Hopefully get their
yourself.
fucking and hopefully get their math right. Yeah, it's like stuff like that, right? It's like but it's truly it's the engineers that like stay up super late and wake up early and come into work and like still make fucking good sound decisions and help me out do my things and teach me things about stuff that I'm passionate and interested about.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Good parting wisdom.
cool,
We'll
man.
end it there, Chase. Good having you on my podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Good to be here.